Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing the behavior and body language of RFK Jr. during his health secretary confirmation hearing. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go.
Well, I got to tell you, for literally hundreds of thousands of Virginians, Medicaid is what prevents them from health crises.
So, as you probably already know, and I need to point this out for a baseline, is that RFK Jr. has something called spasmodic dysphonia, and that does cause his voice to shake. That does cause him to have some slightly spasmic reactions to things. And that has to be taken into consideration when it comes to body language, because body language can be very subtle at times. I am aware of that. I am accounting for that. I just want to point that out before we keep going.
On a daily and weekly basis, and some imaginary new plan. And if there was a new plan that was to be the basis of what Trump was going to do in repealing Obama.
All right, so one of the things we look for are changes in behavior. So as this senator is coming at him aggressively and saying this imaginary plan, shortly after that, you're seeing RFK Jr. start to shuffle around, start to move around. This could be considered a pacifying behavior. So in other words, the feelings are starting to come up, and we're doing this to calm those feelings down. So he could be feeling quite intense right now as he's having somebody else come at him like this. Watch this again. Watch the progression from when he talks about the imaginary plan to right now.
And some imaginary new plan. And if there was a new plan that was to be the basis of what Trump was going to do in repealing Obamacare, I would have thought by now we'd have seen it. I got to tell you, listen.
So you see he's adjusting his seat. He's scooting back a little bit. Oftentimes, particularly in court, we see people scoot their seat back when something's said that they don't like because it's a way to disengage just a little bit. So it's his own way to tolerate the feelings of somebody talking to him so aggressively, to adjust a little bit to try to feel more comfortable. That's partially why we do that when somebody's talking to us this way.
Senator, can I reply to that?
Senator, Mr. Kennedy, I got questions. I appreciate our visit. I know you take your views seriously, and I don't.
And you can see him with his hands crossed in front of himself. Well, maybe you can't see it, but his arms are crossed a little bit now. So this is blocking himself off a little bit more. He's bracing himself. As you can see, he's leaning on his elbows. In a lot of ways, that helps us brace for a fight, so to speak. Obviously, there's not going to be a physical fight, but there's a verbal altercation. So he's bracing himself for that.
Vote. I voted for 4 of President Trump's nominees already. Got a lot of grief from folks on this panel. But I got to tell you, I saw an email that you put out Monday night, or your campaign did, in a fundraising email. Your presidential campaign celebrated that the freeze.
So herein lies one of the big challenges when it comes to confirmation hearings like this, when it comes to trying to respond, is that earlier, just a minute ago, RFK Jr. had something he wanted to say, but the senator asking questions is just pushing forward. So you eventually lose that train of thought. So when you're watching his body language, sometimes it's in response for what he wanted to say a minute ago, but that's all been pushed past and now he has no opportunity to respond to it. So sometimes the body language can be challenging in things like this because he may be thinking about one thing while he's eventually going to have to let go of it and move on to something else because it never has a chance to come back to it.
Your donors to help pay for your campaign debt. Did your campaign, and you put out that?
I don't think my campaign exists anymore.
Right, well,
so this was the first chance he's had to actually respond directly because he was asked a question, because he can't just interrupt. But I want you to watch his facial expression when he's talking about his campaign.
Did your campaign, and you put out that?
I don't.
So if you look at his brow right here, you can see anger. Getting asked this, being talked to in this way, is genuinely irritating him, and him talking about or having to respond to something about his campaign because he says it doesn't exist anymore seems to be irritating to him. So these questions are not things that he wants to have to answer right now. Not necessarily because he's hiding anything, but it seems that the questions are agitating him.
I don't think my campaign exists anymore.
All right, well, listen, I got to tell you this. Somebody's out there soliciting money for it. Maybe you ought to find out who is. So the fact that you celebrate this freeze.
Pointed out.
I'm not asking for. I love Mike Crapo. I'm asking you. You're up very, very important position.
As he pointed out, Senator, the portals that were closed were not closed as a result of the Trump
Let me just tell you.
Now watch what he does with his body right here as he responds to this, once again, confrontational question.
Very, very important position.
As he pointed out, Senator,
So he opened up his body because he's trying to show, I'm going to respond to your question. I have something I want to say. Opening up your body makes you vulnerable. And so in a very literal sense, it opens up the part of you that's most vulnerable. So doing that can be a sign of sincerity or an attempt to actually express oneself.
the portals that were closed were not closed as a result of the Trump
Let me just tell you, I'd like you to
purposeful
explain,
policy.
excuse me, sir, I'd like you to explain to a domestic violence.
And so there you go. You see him adjusting in his seat again. It's almost like scooting back, but not actually. And that helps us psychologically feel like we are getting a little bit of distance. And he braces himself again by leaning on his elbows.
I'd like you to
Purposeful
explain,
policy.
excuse me, sir, I'd like you to explain to a domestic violence center in Richmond that's saying because this freeze, they may have to close down, where are those battered women to go? Or a rural nonprofit I've got in the Shenandoah Valley who's saying that freeze is going to potentially shut down their ability to operate. So I guess if you deny or don't know what your campaign's sending out, you don't know if you raised a lot of money Monday night with you.
I'm saying that the Trump
You don't
administration
know.
So watch his shoulders right here. Now, when we do this, it oftentimes means, I don't know. Obviously, when you see somebody struggle like that, you think, I don't know. When it's with one shoulder, you tend to think that's maybe a little bit less honest. Two shoulders is levitating. It's a way that we are very vulnerable when we lift both shoulders. So we tend to think that that's associated with honesty. So when he does this, I think when he talks about the campaign donations or whatever it is that the senator's talking about, I think that's something he really doesn't know.
You don't know if you raised a lot of money Monday night with you.
I'm saying that the Trump
You don't
administration
know if you raised a lot of money.
the Trump administration has made clear it's under Medicaid or Medicare, and I do not want to dismantle Medicaid.
The freeze is affecting beyond Medicare and Social Security. I would hope you would have known that.
You see also that he's touching a cup right now. Now, this is probably also a way to soothe himself. Sometimes, and once again, I do cover a lot of true crime, so you can see this oftentimes when people are on trials. There is a rhythm to when people drink water. Sometimes it's just because they're thirsty, but also when there's a fight, when somebody's arguing with you, your mouth can get dry, or when there's things that you don't want to answer and you start feeling anxious. That can have different effects on you. But in this situation, it seems that the confrontation is driving him to hold on to the cup because that's a way to help calm yourself down.
To be able to answer some of this. Now, you've said publicly you want to immediately get rid of 600 NIH workers on job one, on day one. When we had our meeting,
That are changed during every administration.
so if you got rid of those 200 political appointees, you're not going to replace them with your political appointees.
Well, President Biden this year changed 3,000 employees at HHS. 3,700
Now, you see his eyebrows right here. Now, watch this.
changed 3,000.
So he wants you to do two things. One, pay attention to his face. And two, raising your eyebrows can be a way to show surprise. I do think this is a combination of the two, and it can be hard to distinguish. But I think that he's trying to show, I have surprising information for you. The Biden administration changed 3,000 people. So he's trying to say, this is surprising given the way you're confronting me. And on top of that, he wants you to listen to what he's saying. So this raising of the eyebrows has a dual function right here.
Employees at HHS. 3,750
So
at NIH.
you're 2,200. What departments are you going to pick them from?
Well, the same as President Biden did when he changed 3,000 out. They're
Let me
from
just,
across all
I'm down to a
departments.
minute 30. The chairman's been generous with colleagues on both sides. I may have to go a couple minutes over. But let me just say, so let's just answer, this would be,
Now watch his mouth right here after he made this point.
let me just,
Across all
I'm down to a
departments.
minute 30. The chairman's been generous with colleagues on both sides. I may have to go a couple minutes over.
You see the corner of his mouth right here. Now, it looks like a little bit of a smirk, but it can also be interpreted as contempt because basically all emotions are on both sides of the body. Now, the fact that he has spasmodic dysphonia may make his a little bit different, so some of these slight movements may be harder to interpret with him. So I'm going to just say that cautiously. But oftentimes, typically, we would associate this with contempt because contempt is the only emotion that shows on just one side of the face.
I do want to talk to you about some areas that you and I have talked about as well. We have some disagreements, you and I, on the issue of life. And when life begins on that, you've been very outspoken on that.
So you reached over and saw him touch his cup once abortion's brought up again, once we see that that's where this conversation or these questions are going. I've talked about this before, how there's different things that we use to pacify ourselves. And a topic like this is going to be extremely consequential, regardless of where you fall on it, regardless of what your beliefs are about this. This is an extremely consequential conversation. And so as it's getting brought up, as he's preparing himself, that's a very subtle way to help yourself feel more calm. You can ground yourself. Because when you think about drinking, it touches our lips. There's lots of nerves in our lips. It calms us down. So when people sip water, when they sip drinks, it helps us feel calm. Even just reaching over and touching a cup that we are going to be drinking from can also help us feel calmer.
Referral for or promotion of abortion as a part of the Title X program. That he made that very clear in the first administration. Obviously, that's his decision to make again on that, on how he wants to handle that, and he's made a lot of public statements on that.
So one thing that you're not seeing as they continue to talk about this is you are not seeing him scoot around in his chair, adjust, those kinds of things, because the type of energy, even if there's some anxiety around it, even if this is an important topic, is different.
In the punitive measures that came on my state for those that are in rural health care, how are you going to handle Title X?
I'm going to support President Trump's policies on Title X. I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy.
So watch his eyes right here.
How are you going to handle Title X?
I'm going to support President Trump's policies on Title X. I agree with President.
So when he said, I agree with President Trump, raising his eyebrows, he does believe that. That is true.
Trump that every abortion is a tragedy.
As he said, every abortion is a tragedy. Once again, flashed his eyebrows up. He really wants you to pay attention to that. He's not trying to hide from that. This seems to be very much how he actually feels about this topic.
Of what you have said on vaccinations, including a promise from you never to say vaccines aren't medically safe when they in fact are, and making indisputably clear.
You see, there was an immediate reaction to that when he's talking about vaccines. Now he's bracing his forearm. And this is a bit different than when we comfortably cross our arms. Bracing our forearm does mean that there is tension inside of us, that question caused him to be tense, that maybe there was something about responding to that he's feeling tense about. Let's listen to that again and watch this in context.
To say vaccines aren't medically safe when they in fact are, and making indisputably clear that you support mandatory vaccinations against diseases.
And his blink rate is also picking up. So now he's bracing his arm. His blink rate is picking up. He may know that vaccines may be his biggest challenge when it comes to getting confirmed.
Where that will keep people safe. You're in that hole pretty deep. We've just had a measles case in Rhode Island. CMS has for years maintained a reimbursement system that the bureaucracy
goes back to the cup, much like I pointed out earlier. So you're going to see him do that just as a way to soothe himself.
So here's an easy question. Will you commit that when you leave this job, you will not accept compensation from a drug company, a medical device company, a hospital system, or a health insurer for at least 4 years, including as a lobbyist or a board member?
Can you just repeat the last part of the question? Can I commit
You're
to
not
what?
going to take money from drug companies in any way, shape, or form.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh.
So as he's being confronted with this question about taking money from drug companies, I want you to watch his eyebrows. We've talked about this before.
Can you just repeat the last part of the question? Can I commit
You're
to
not
what?
going to take money from drug companies in any way, shape, or form.
Me?
Yes, you.
So there's the look of shock. Now you see his eyes wide open, his eyebrows up, his mouth open when he's saying, who's going to take money from drug companies? Me. So there's an actual look of shock that's the question being asked right there.
Take money from drug companies in any way, shape, or form.
Me?
Yes, you.
Oh. Yeah, I'm happy to commit to that.
Okay, good. That's what I figured. I said it's an easy question to start with. And I think you're right on this question.
I don't think any of them want to give me money, by the way.
Let's keep going. You're right because to say yes, because every American has the right to know that every decision you make as our #1 health officer is to help them and not to make money for yourself in the future. So I want to talk more about money. I'm looking at your paperwork right now. In the past 2 years, you've raked in $2.5 million from a law firm called Wisner Baum. You go online, you do commercials to encourage people to sign up with Wisner Baum to join lawsuits against vaccine makers. And for everyone who signs up,
All right, so there's that touch again, a way to calm down as he's hearing this.
personally get paid And if they win their case,
Now he's starting to adjust in his seat. You see this a lot more when it comes from the other side of the aisle because he tends to be confronted more. Not surprisingly, we get more uncomfortable when that happens, but that is something that he does. He adjusts in his seat like that when he starts to get confronted.
you get 10% of what they win. So if you bring in somebody who gets $10 million, you walk away with $1 million.
Now, one thing that he's very good at is that oftentimes when people are in hearings like this and they're getting asked these questions, they're trying to show their body language as much as possible. They're trying to shake their head no or nod yes or whatever. They're trying to go ahead and preemptively give an answer to the question. He doesn't do that, which doesn't give them something to work off of. So as far as having people ask you confrontational questions, he's actually doing a very good job of fielding those, because the worst thing you can do is to let people know how you're feeling, or to more overtly let people know how you're feeling if you don't want to be in a position where they can attack you more. So he's actually handling this quite well from a body language standpoint, because he's not really doing much in that regard.
Now, you just said that you want the American people to know you can't be bought. Your decisions won't depend on how much money you could make in the future. Let me start the list. You could publish your anti-vaccine conspiracies, but this time on U.S. government letterhead, something a jury might be impressed by. You could appoint people
I don't
to
understand
the
that.
CDC.
So not surprisingly, because I'm sure you can hear it in his voice, you are starting to see some real anger here. You're starting to see the brow get angry again. So there have been times where he's felt confronted. There may be times where he's feeling a little bit irritated. Now he seems to be actually angry.
Letterhead, something a jury might be impressed by. You could appoint
I
people
don't
to the
understand that.
CDC vaccine panel who share your anti-vax views and let them do your dirty work. You could tell the CDC vaccine panel to remove a particular vaccine from the vaccine schedule. You could remove vaccines from special compensation programs, which would...
So I know I pointed out the cup, and I have a number of times, but it really is consequential. That really does clue us into when somebody is feeling their most stressed. So during something like this, taking a sip of a drink is a way to calm us down. It's a way to regain control over the unconscious part of our body that's acting up.
would open up manufacturers to mass torts. You could make more injury.
And as you can see, once again, scooting back, disconnecting a little bit, trying to gain a little bit of distance, even though literally it might be an inch. He's not really gaining distance, but the unconscious mind treats it like that.
Is eligible for compensation even if there is no causal evidence. You could change vaccine court processes to make it easier to bring junk lawsuits.
All right, we'll go ahead and stop here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of what we observed during the confirmation hearing today. These confirmation hearings are almost always contentious. They always deal with challenges. So a lot of what we saw today was how he handles this type of pressure, how he handles being attacked, how he handles these types of conflicts and arguments. If there's anything else from this that you feel like I missed, please let me know in the comments below. And if there's anything else you want me to analyze, I'd also be interested in hearing about that. Last thing before we get finished up is I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, thanks for watching.